the free states were not going to be able to convince the slave states to do away with slavery at the founding of the United States when they were adopting a constitution. The question now became whether or not the slave states could impose some sort of a constitutional change at some point in time in order to allow slavery in those states that were already free states. And so the trick that was adopted primarily at the pressure of the free states was, because what gave you the number of senators, and not the number of senators, but representatives in Congress, was a function of your population.
That's right, still is.
And the slave states wanted to count slaves
to get
in
more
their population.
Right.
And the free states basically got together and said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that, because if we allow you to do that, then you're going to be able, by bringing in more slaves, to overwhelm us with population and impose your constitutional will on us. And so what they basically did was they said, no, you can't count slaves as people for the purpose of representation. They argued back and forth and finally came to a compromise, which, again, I don't recall the exact proportion. I could look it up on the internet now, but I don't want to, maybe during the break. And it was like the 2/5 or whatever, 3/5 rule, where a slave was only counted as 2/5 or 3/5 of a person.
Oh, I see.
Now, that has been used to attack the people who attended the Constitutional Convention, arguing that, you see, those people only counted slaves as only 2/5 of a person or 3/5 of a person, you bad people. Without understanding, and I always come down to this when we're talking about implementing tough policies and making fundamental changes in politics, is you have to deal with, especially in a democracy, you have to deal with the political realities the way they are, not the way you wish they were. And so what they did was it was a way of the free states finding a way to disempower the slave states rather than the other way around. And in fact, this one could argue that as between the founding of the United States and the Civil War, there was, especially, getting closer to the Civil War years, there was a lot of wrestling over the constitutionality of slavery going on. And so the big question was, for new states invited into the Union, will those new states be slave states or free states? And eventually they had to come up with another compromise, and that compromise was basically below a certain
Mason-Dixon line,
and that was the Mason-Dixon line.
That's right.
So the Mason-Dixon line was the border of, in this part of North America, was the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland.
Right.
Maryland was a slave state. Pennsylvania was a free state. And Maryland, by the way, even though Maryland was a slave state, Maryland fought for the Union in the Civil War.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
okay.
Interestingly enough.
Now,
lots of things.
With that,
but here's the thing. Okay, how do you learn? Nobody's learning. This is important. This is important.
Well, it's
history.
An interesting segue into modern education. We were talking in our pre-production meeting about vouchers and the value of vouchers. Ontario right now spends about a little over $12,000 per student, and overall, our education, the quality of the education provided to the kids of Ontario is declining. I don't think there's any argument about that. All you got to do is try to read anything these kids have written, and again, I'm painting with a pretty broad brush. There's some brilliant young men and women out there, no doubt about it. But overall, in general, the comprehension is declining, the ability to write is declining, the ability to extrapolate raw data and come to the right conclusion is declining. Our scores in math and the sciences are all declining. And the reason is because you have the focus in schools on areas other than these that's taking time away from teaching things like cursive writing. And vouchers, what they do is they put the power of the tax dollar back in the hands of parents. So let's say the state were to go out and teach and give, by the state, I'm talking about the state, the royal state, in other words, Ontario in this case. Ontario were to give parents a voucher worth $10,000, little less than what they spend now. It would save them some money, first of all, $2,000 a student, and $10,000 would go a long way to allowing parents, regardless of their income, to go out and find the best school available for their kids. And if the school isn't up to scratch, they got two choices. They can either make the school better or the funding disappears because the parents pull their kids from that school and go to a better one. And I think that provides a tremendous power in the hands of parents. Now, teacher unions are going to hate it. Teachers should love it because there's no shortage for demand for teachers. But teacher unions don't want to lose the power they now have over the education system. So there are going to be some real resistance to that. But I'm just thinking that there's, compared to what they're offering now, they're talking about online learning coming up. And one of the reasons why some people like it is because a lot of those people already homeschool and are attuned to it. But in general, education needs to be done face-to-face. So when you sit down and you discuss American history or you discuss history in general, the focus should be on accuracy, not modern-day sensitivities. Like, we're not going to tear down statues of Churchill and Victoria and of John A. Macdonald because in our modern worldview they were terrible people. Terrible or not, they're still the people who had a significant role in shaping our country, right. And their statues there to remind us of that.
It reminds me, I guess, the conversation we had in the previous podcast about how much power you want to give any government, whether you support it or not, whether you voted for them or not, because there's a back and forth going on now with the United States. Well, when Trump was president, he was definitely against the 1619 project. Now the Democratic administration under Biden, they seem to be pushing it a bit. And now you have governors who are pushing back. I believe just recently Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, said we're not doing the 1619 project in our schools. So as the governor, he has the authority to say that. Right. Whereas, the governor of another
state is a state jurisdiction. Yeah. And South Dakota too, right?
Pardon me?
South Dakota too.
Probably South Dakota too.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Given the fact, I love the governor of South Dakota. She runs a cafe called the Roadkill Cafe, and there's a picture of her serving a platter of food. She's got a Glock on her hip in a holster. Love it.
Yeah. The problem is, though, if she's not the governor next time, or if DeSantis is not the governor next time,
that's a risk every politician runs.
For the people of the state, if you're a Floridian and you say, well, I don't want this 1619 project taught in my school, and when we say not taught, no one's saying don't teach history, whatever happened before 1776. Of course, let's
if the first slaves arrived in the New World in 1619, then that's important to know.
It's a fact. But the country did not begin, our Constitution did not begin in 1619. If you're American, that's not when the Constitution began. So let's be factual.
And the war, by the way, it was signed before the war was even over. That's what makes it so remarkable, is that the people who signed it were literally putting their head in the noose. Because if they had lost, they'd have been hung as traitors.
And how is this making life better for anyone anyways? How does this project make life better?
It's not about making life better. Here? It's about making, for the masses, it's about making people who have an agenda feel better. It's all about, today it's all about feelings.
Feeling better. Yeah.
Like, how many times do you have to be careful about what you say? It's almost like we're walking around on eggshells, worried about every word we post on Facebook or everything we say in public. I don't know if we'll get into it tonight, but Ron McLean got into some hot water for a comment he made. Okay, I won't go into it now. Like I said, if we get to it, we'll talk about it in the next.
Well,
segment,
I think what we'll do is I'm watching the time here. We have a couple more minutes, but I think if you guys don't mind, and our listeners don't mind, and even if our listeners did mind, we're going to carry this conversation on into the next segment because there's so much here to unpack, actually.
Yeah.
I think what we've done is we've scratched the surface of it. But why don't you have 2 minutes to just talk a little bit about Ron MacLean?
Well, Ron MacLean made a comment about somebody wearing a tarp, and he must be positive for something. He was talking about a hockey player.
He's a hockey commentator here in Canada.
For our other than Canadian audience, hockey is our unofficial national sport. Ron MacLean is one of the most beloved and well-known hockey commentators in the world. When it comes to hockey, everybody knows who Ron MacLean is, and he's been at it for 40 years. He's very, very good at it. Now, there's been some Greek controversy around him and his sidekick for many years, Don Cherry, which is a whole other story. But he made a comment, an offhanded comment, about somebody being in a locker room without his tarp on, without his shirt on. And he really looked ripped and must be positive for something. And somehow that turned into homophobia, and how that coming up to Pride Week, they want this guy fired. And I just have to wonder aloud, what kind of country are we in where somebody makes an offhanded, maybe a stupid remark, but that's going to cost him his career if this goes through? Like, does that the punishment fit the crime?
Well, I have to confess to you, I don't even get it. When I heard that he'd done this or said this, I thought, what? What does that even mean? Well, I don't get it. Is there some special language now or whatever that, I'm 58 years old. I don't know what the youngster, but of course Ron MacLean's no kid.
No, he's in his 60s. He's got to be.
I don't know what. I have no idea what he was talking about.
Well, I'll give you the exact quote.
Okay, no, hold on to it. Okay, we have to go for a break here. So we're going to be back in a few minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.